Okay, 1 minute, just bear with me. Okay. Anyway, all right, so peace and blessings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, who was to come, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. Amen. I don't know what's going on with this close up that's occurring here. Um, yeah. Unfortunately, unfortunately, this close up can't be stopped. It's just some random close up that's going on. I don't know how to sort it out. But anyway, yeah. So peace and blessings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. As you can see with the title, books I've recently bought and a critique of Anglican churches. I want to start off by speaking about something sort of different to that. So, as you guys probably know, over at Speaker's Corner, which I haven't attended in some months now, I think it's been borderline 9 months that I haven't been to Speaker's Corner. The history is, I and Bob, and by of course extension, JC, the cameraman of Soca Films, and others as well, have a evident disagreement when it comes to doctrine, soteriology, of course, theology, eschatology, and all of the tologies, pretty much. Especially when it comes to Bob's theology regarding evolution. I and Bob have had this disagreement for quite some time now. I confronted Bob about 2 years ago, pretty much 2 years ago now, on the topic of course, what the Roman Catholic Church teaches in the Catechism, ready to start a conversation about these very, very, of course, tense topics. I feel like ignoring these topics and leaving them aside does no service for the cause that he's trying to promulgate. I kind of find it interesting. The very cause that he's trying to promulgate, which is Christian fellowship, which in his mind entails those who believe in Trinitarian theology and affirm the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ, which would include yours truly, by the way. He will immediately, much like, of course, many, and immediately anathematize those who have an ardent disagreement with his theology. Now, I want to make it very clear: his theology, not historic ancient theology, not biblical theology, his theology. And will be, my, of course, goal here is not to essentially have a go at Bob. Oh, why are you pointing at Bob, mate? Like, that's not what is going on here. What I am essentially going to do is challenge his presuppositions, and I'm going to be doing so via his blog. Now, he has a blog, of course, over on, I think it's called Soco something, whatever. He calls it Soldier of Christ Online, whatever it is, right? And it goes by the name of Bob Soco. He had recently uploaded a little post titled, something along the lines of "Lord, loosen my tongue." The five solas, of course, are they, of course, a detriment? And I'm paraphrasing. Are they a detriment, of course, to ecumenism, or why they should be done away with for more favourable understandings of ecumenism? Ebionites, I'll answer that briefly, and I'll get back to the Bob situation. So, Ebionites are a culture that may have existed during the time of what we understand to be the copies of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. We don't know much about them other than, of course, what we find within the literature they left behind. But other than that, we don't really have an extensive view of what they believed and what they taught. People have stated to me, on my person, that, the Ebionites, the early Christians, and they denied the crucifixion, death, burial, resurrection. They denied a load of stuff. But, it's kind of, as Henry Chadwick says in his book on the early church, just because we have an example of some community that claims to be Christian, that's early, that doesn't mean that it represents the witness of Catholicity throughout, of course, the first century. And it doesn't mean that they represent the first century witness of all Christians. For example, we have, of course, the Judaizers in the book of Galatians. And evidently, these Judaizers affirm the idea that salvation was by, of course, works, and salvation was by keeping the law and being circumcised. So if you didn't adhere to the 10 Commandments or you broke them, you would be outside of salvation. Now, this was hastily dealt with at the Council of Jerusalem. In the book of Acts chapter 15, you can actually view the Council of Jerusalem. You can view the proceedings going on there and the appeals to scripture therein. My opinion is this, that although we can, of course, assume that there was some sort of Ebionite culture that affirmed some positions, that doesn't mean that was the total witness of all believers at the time. And of course, we can't ignore the extensive witness of those who, of course, met Jesus Christ, such as the apostles, and of course the prophets, and of course their successors, like the immediate successors, like Clement of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, and by extension, of course, Irenaeus and Papias. Some will say, well, Papias, we're getting fragments of what he says from Irenaeus, and Irenaeus, we really have got some stuff from him, according to Eusebius. So we can't really know anything. But I would say, well, when we open up extensively the historical remit of our scope of what is considered historical, we're going to have to allow for some sort of credibility here. And Muslims do the same thing all the time. Muslims allow for credibility of their sources, but yet they do not want the Christians to have credibility for theirs, and that's the problem. But yeah, anyway, back to this Bob situation. So Bob has written on his blog something along the lines of, Christian ecumenism, how the five solas don't affect it, or should the five solas be done away with? He opens up with some context of the previous Archbishop of Canterbury and the Archbishop of York, both, of course, who affirmed gay marriage and did weird stuff. And I'll be pointing out in my response. But yeah, both of these individuals he pointed out as basically rebuking the distastefulness and the disdain that the Reformation has caused. I found that funny because to me, like, the prior centuries of the Catholic Church unaliving and butchering people for merely having a different understanding, not distasteful, a different understanding of the Eucharist is laughable. And he speaks about reform only occurring at a certain time. I would challenge Bob on that, because there are so many reforms throughout church history is laughable. Bob's ideology evidently is the later ideology, and we're going to see that as, of course, I deal with his content. But yeah, so I already spoke about the fact that we had a spat speakers corner, left turn right, right turn left, and basically we're not in agreements. Now, the last time I spoke to Bob, instead of actually engaging in any sort of discussion on these points, he of course did an ad hominem fallacy against me. And an hominem fallacy is basically, attacking the man instead of attacking the argument. And you can actually see this. You can witness it on Soko Films. It was actually laughable that it was uploaded. It was embarrassing for him. He seemed to think that by yelling out obscenities, claiming things that are just flagrantly untrue, that somehow he's got one over on me. He claimed, for example, that my wife was a rebound. He was claiming all sorts of stuff, but nothing pertaining to the actual point, because he's scared. And he can give whatever excuse he wants mentally. That's fine. I don't blame him for being scared, of course. There comes a time where every man needs to, of course, correct themselves in their theology, and he doesn't want to do that. And especially doesn't want somebody from his inner circle to do that. Because the minute somebody from your own inner circle does that, although I don't need to know his name or anything like that, he knows that I'm from his inner circle. He knows I've heard his arguments. He knows that his arguments are petty and lewd and just pathetic. He knows that. I've seen his arguments pertaining to the solas, and they're weak. He doesn't know anything about the history of the solas at all. He cites Calvin once, and he doesn't even cite scripture in his little post at all. I think there's only one time, actually. I'll give him that. One time he cites something. I think it's 1 Timothy. That's pretty much it. He's not citing anything. He's precluding his own position, first of all, and I need him to establish that. You see, the whole argument behind whether ecumenism is true is whether the presupposition of this set of systems is true. Before we talk about what you consider the church to be, let's talk about what the church is and how we define what it is and what are going to be the premises we are using to define the church. Let's not just make up our own system of Catholicity and then, branch it out to the rest of the world. It's ridiculous. The Pope won't be able to deal with that. And he will give excuses like, I don't like him, he's too angry. Blah, blah, blah. That's fine. That's what the liberals say, And I'm not going to hunt him down anymore, because I've realized that he's a coward. And why would I want to talk to a coward? But I noticed he spoke to a Catholic at Speaker's Corner. Kind of interesting. Considering the same man, by the way, with all his chest, said 2 years ago, oh, guess what, Jono? I'm not going to debate you because that's sectarian. But it's not sectarian if you debate a Catholic. I mean, mate, that makes sense. And I don't know whether, from what I've seen, Soko Films has not uploaded that video. So they're at odds. They're at odds. Because naturally, you can't help but be a sectarian, Bob. That's the default of your position. In order to proclaim any sort of doctrinal standard, even ecumenism, you have to, of course, be a sectarian to do so. Because you're going to be dealing with the slaves of other churches who disagree with your opinion, including their historicity and their opinions therein and their traditions. And, it's kind of funny because he appeals to the Roman Catholic churches and Eastern Orthodox churches. But any learned Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox church goer would be in complete disagreement with him. It is the position of Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox churches that Protestants are not Christians. You know, that's been the historical Catholic position for at least as long as there's been a Roman Catholic Church, I suppose. And when I say as long as there's been a Roman Catholic Church, of course, the institution of the Roman Catholic Church, I'm not referring to the Roman Church. I don't think the institution of the Roman Catholic Church has actually survived since, of course, 33 AD, as they like to tell others. I actually saw, this is kind of funny. I actually saw this was, there was this channel called Discruo or something like that by, what's his name? Militant Thomas. Well, he used to be called Militant Thomas. I think he's called something else right now. But yeah, Christian Wagner has a YouTube channel called Discruo or something like that. I can't remember. And there's a 12-hour video of him debunking Protestantism, which I kind of found funny. I don't know how you got the energy to literally bang out 12 hours like that, you know. You know, and somebody in the comments was saying it was like a new version of Against Heresies. I was like, this is laughable. You know, I mean, it is original, I suppose, but I don't know who's going to sit down and watch that for 12 hours. Yeah, I don't know who's going to sit around and watch that for 12 hours. That would be mad. Maybe, please. Okay, yeah, so 12 hours. Ridiculous. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah. All right. Yeah, but anyway, Bob is, you know, he's an interesting character. I know people are obsessed with him. I'm not obsessed with him. I haven't spoken about him in ages. We did confront him publicly, but I'm not going to confront him anymore. But if he's willing to have a decent and timed conversation, I'm willing to do that. But we would have to apologize to my wife and me. So, I mean, if he hasn't got the actual, you know, humility of a Christian to be able to do that, because I know he's not a Christian anyway, if he hasn't got the humility to be able to do that, then I guess there can be no conversation to be had. Because for me, I've grown out of this sort of, oh, I'm going to go and ragtag debate you. I'm grown out of that. It's childish. It's what I leave that to the people on TikTok, especially the random, of course, 23-year-olds, 26-year-olds over there. But for me, it's just, it gets boring after a while. Hence why even on TikTok, I don't run on other people's platforms. I just remain on my own. How are you doing, Roll Up Evans? God bless you. So yeah, I will be dealing with this post. I've actually just started culminating, of course, a response to it. It's interesting to do it that way, and if he wants to, of course, engage that way, that's fine. But I'll be actually making that available for others as well. I'll be doing my own website over online. I haven't actually done it yet, but I'll be doing it and I'll be completing it, and people can actually go and look at the opposite side and come to their own conclusions. You see, ultimately, in the field of discourse, it really is just going to be about the perceiver coming to their own conclusions. And so I don't feel any desperation or need to be like, oh, I need to get our response quickly. Otherwise, the argument's gone, or oh, this or that or that. No, not really. And this is why I say to people, even when it comes to Speaker's Corner, winning debates and winning arguments, ultimately, winning debates and winning arguments can be easy once you know all these arguments. But once you know all these arguments, it can get really boring. Like, because you know the answers, of course. You know what people are going to say. You of course, predicate that, you know, upon your prior knowledge of what people have said before. And, you know, it just becomes really long and disjointed. So I'd rather, of course, educate and edify the body so that people can go out and share the gospel effectively. And when they go down Speaker's Corner, they can know who to avoid and who to mark, because the Bible evidently does teach that we mark and avoid certain people. And by the way, that would include Trinitarians who affirm, of course, the death, burial, and resurrection book. Because guess what? That's not the thing that affirms one as a Christian. Now, you know, evidently, you know, he goes into sola fide, sola gratia, sola scriptura. I'm going to go through all of that. I'm going to demolish each and every point he makes. I mean, his point, I mean, there's one point actually, I mean, you guys don't even know this. There's just one point where he just basically goes off and says, well, it's like, you know, after, you know, it's like when you call somebody, he's comparing it to, of course, prayer to saints. He's trying to say intercession's like, of course, this. It's like when you call somebody and, you know, and of course, then they hung up the phone and you're still talking on the phone. I'm like, Bob, if you're still talking on your phone to yourself, you are mad. Like, there is, what's going on here? You are actually weirdo. I mean, so that was actually one of the arguments he made for intercession, funny enough, in his little bit on Soli Deo Gloria. But I'll be dealing with all of that, so that's going to be funny. But anyway, let me move to the topic. Books I've recently bought. So yeah, I've recently bought some books. I'm going to start in order I bought them. You know, because I'm trying to grow intellectually, especially when it comes to theological discussions, and not just theological discussions. I want to teach more as well. I want to also, share more of what I've learned on here, of course. And that's why I did the whole series on Tulip, which I haven't completed because of other commitments. I did, of course, the last video 4 weeks ago, which is it's like what? I've got to really stop procrastinating, doing TikTok lives. I've got to be bang on the point. So I'm hoping to do Irresistible Grace and Perseverance of the Saints sometime soon. Perseverance of the Saints is easy for me. I've got all of the sources anyway, because that's standard. I defend it anyway. It's the gospel, pretty much. But I also have got to make sure that with not unconditional election, what I'm talking about, Irresistible Grace, I've got to make sure, of course, that I'm dealing with that correctly. So I want to get back to that. Unfortunately, that was one of the topics that James White in his book, The Potter's Freedom, didn't really speak too much about. He wasn't really talking about that side too much, but we'll get there. Anyway, so here's the first one. There Is a God by Anthony Flew. I've started reading this, but I briefly stopped because I wanted to try another book. But basically, this book is written by, of course, Anthony Flew. But Anthony Flew used to be an atheist philosopher. He denied God's existence for most of his life. He then, of course, ended up giving his life to, of course, God later on. Now, when I say God, he affirms a sort of deistic position. This book was recommended to me by somebody online. Of course, shout out Redefine Living, who's a presuppositionist. And basically, half of the book is him, of course, his story, how he came to, of course, know that there was a God, the various arguments he's utilizing. And the second book is, of course, his arguments against, of course, the atheist presupposition. I keep saying, of course, my apologies. I in the past I used to say, you know, and now I say, of course. I don't know what it is, but yeah. So in the second part, of course, is going on again. Funny enough, in the second part, you've got this my discovery of the divine, and of course, after that, you've got him doing a argument against the atheist presupposition. So that's what he's doing. He's doing an argument against the atheist presupposition, but he's also started off, of course, doing a basic underlining of how he was, where he came from, what he grew up around. His father was actually a Methodist pastor who was a tutor at Cambridge, and Anthony essentially grew up at what is known as Kingswood College, Kingswood School. That's where he grew up. And that's where he spent, of course, a bit of his life there. And then, during that time, he actually discovered he had some sort of atheistic inclinations within him. And so he started to debate his own school members. And from then, he had decided he wasn't a Christian, but he still had this analytic mindset that his father had, who was a previous Methodist pastor. So it's a really good book. I haven't read it all yet, but I've heard good reviews of this, and I will be reading it. Second on the list is this, which I bought yesterday, so I've not read it. But this is Metaphysics by D.W. Hamlin. According to the back, it says this book provides an introduction to metaphysics. At the outset, Professor Hamlin disguises two conceptions of metaphysics, running it through the history of the subject, one which goes back to Aristotle and is concerned with ontology, and with that which has to exist for beings such as we are. The other separates appearance and reality and attempts to establish what really exists. Professor Hamlin's account of metaphysics confirms the first tradition. This is not, however, a primary historical exposition. The discussion concentrates on central metaphysical concepts and problems, including the principles of ontology, substance, particulars, universals, monism, pluralism, space-time, mind, selves, and personal identity. Throughout, Professor Hamlin's thoroughly informed and argued consideration of the topics presents both a persuasive view of the subject and an excellent grounding in it. The reason why I wanted to get this is because when you're dealing with atheists, if you don't know big words like empiricism or empirical or ontological or ontology, that which is related to the study of being, that which is related to the study of knowledge or to what one knows, or the study of what one knows. If you don't know how to utilize these words, then it becomes a bit complex to, sort of ground yourself in the arena of debates in this topic. And also for my own personal knowledge as well, it's not just about debating people. My own personal knowledge as well, I want to, of course, know that the language I'm using, whether it be when I'm teaching, of course, here, or when I'm, of course, speaking in public to people, that the language I'm using can be conveyed properly, and that also I can also break that down so then the person who I'm speaking to can understand it as well. Because 9 times out of 10, people are not reading books on metaphysics, but metaphysics also interests me as well. That's the other reason. Metaphysics does interest me. Um, I mean, I remember having debates a while back on the topic of metaphysics, and I was given words like ontology and stuff like that. Do you presuppose the PSR, the principle of sufficient reasoning? Do you do this? Do you do that? And I'm just lost. I'm like, what is this? And that's where atheists can intellectually bully you if you don't understand these concepts. So for me, although I do understand what ontology is and empiricism is, and empirical is, I understand what these terms mean. I also want to be able to explain them better rather than just explain them on a sort of surface level. Now, here's where, of course, you don't have to get these books to know this stuff. And a lot of people critique watching YouTube videos. Well, I mean, much like a book, watching YouTube videos is going to be the opinions of somebody, right? We can't avoid it being opinions of somebody. When I'm reading a book, for example, that's going to be opinions of somebody. Now, but here's the difference with the book and with a person. With the book, it's more thought out. It has to be, because this is on print. It's not something you can just simply conceal in a myriad of voices. It's something that, of course, is going to be in print and can be looked into, researched. Any quotation you bring up can be researched. But with online spaces, especially with YouTube and TikTok, people could just quote things mindlessly, and of course, people could just quote them, and there's no, of course, backlash to that quote, because you can't go and look and go and research what they've said, because they've said it so fast, it's done. But even if they've not said it so fast, even if they've said it slowly, how are you going to know the context and the background of what is going on in that quotation that they quote? For example, Catholics quote all the time this claim of the Eucharist, that Ignatius taught the Eucharist. Oh, Ignatius was a Roman Catholic. But then when you actually read against the Smyrnians, he's speaking about those Docetists who deny that Jesus Christ came in the flesh, in context, when he says they deny the flesh and blood of Christ. You wouldn't know that unless you read it. Now, a lot of people have been stumped by this verse. They've been like, oh, he teaches the Eucharist. No. The interesting characterization here is, how is the language going to be utilized in the hermeneutical principle and the narrative context we're using to determine what is in the actual words themselves of the author. And I find it just abhorrent when Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics quote unquote church fathers, and they quote them out of context, and then I go to those church fathers and I read those church fathers, and they're not saying what they say. And I've heard them do it many times. And this can be, of course, I refer to debate or discussion, or not even discussion, it was the argument I had with Sig that lasted about 5 hours, when I was actually going to a source and we were reading the source. And of course, this munchkin went, of course, to the other. And that'll be that's the least abusive thing I could say about him. But the munchkin decided to go and go to another passage of Athanasius and completely misinterpret it. It's not hard to win debates, by the way. If you know how to do sophistry, you can win any debate. It's simple as that. People don't understand that. But, and that's why people look up to this guy, Sig, because it's not really about what he's saying, because they can't critique it, because they're not intelligent enough. They're just like, well, he's defending my position. But the internal problems and differences between, of course, the Eastern Orthodox and the Protestant position are entirely unsolved. And what's assumed is, well, this is the older church, this is the younger church, rather than where is the doctrinal continuity with the Eastern Orthodox Church versus the Protestant church. And so there are ways to look at this. And it's interesting because a figure in my life, I'm not going to say what I'm doing, but a figure in my life actually, made me think, of course, in a different way about the Bible. Not in the sense that I don't affirm the Bible to be true, but there are ways of looking at these objects like the Bible or like the church fathers from an external point of view, from an internal critique. So you've got different ways of looking into literature. It's kind of interesting, right? And so for something like Sig's position, he will be, of course, presupposing his doctrines and then reading them into the literacy of the church fathers. I, of course, would have taken a more objective position that would be more aligned, of course, with the grounds of the first witness of the apostles and Jesus Christ, which would be the New Testament. So we are, in essence, we are grounding our positions on presuppositions. I'm not denying that. I'm saying we are. But the difference between my position and his is that mine is thoroughly grounded upon what? The witness of the early church fathers. Sorry, the earliest Christians, the Bible, of course. So yeah, I mean, but coming back to metaphysics, I've just gone on a tangent. Coming back to metaphysics, um, for me, it's quite simple. I want to know as much as I can for as long as I can. And if the Lord wills that I am able to do this, then I will do it, and I don't mind doing it. I've already told you guys I have an affinity for Greg Barnson. I really liked his work. Of course, it's a shame that he's not alive today because I would actually have a conversation. Like some of these books I've got up here, which some of them I've not read. I ain't gonna lie. Sometimes I just get books and I collect them. I don't read them, right? But I've read most. But there are some on here that I've not read entirely. I will admit I've not read the entire Institutes, which I should be getting into. It's because I've been stuck in the face of other books. Evidently, the book I've been reading more than any of these books is going to be this book. Because, yeah, I mean, it's the KJV, of course, but it's the Bible nonetheless. And evidently, the reason why I'm reading this book is because it's God's word. I want to make that central to my heart, my mind. Now, sometimes the Lord gives me the ability to recall every jot and tittle of this, but sometimes I can't. And that's where I need to go back to the drawing board. I feel like I'm just like, God's actually made me a total slave to him in the sense that I have to go back to the scriptures to know anything, to be able to, to debate or discuss anything. So you've got to have this in your arsenal, whatever, man. This has got to be what you read first thing before you even jump into these. Now, this is the third book that I've bought that I am actually currently reading, and it is called The River Between, by a man by the name I can't pronounce, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Ngugi wa Thiong'o. This, from what I understand, I've only read, of course, 3 chapters, but this is about a boy who becomes later a man. I haven't read the chapters where he becomes a man. A young boy who was born in a village whose name I cannot pronounce, which is, of course, beyond the mountains of, I think it's Narumbe or something like that, in Kenya. So this is about a young man who's born in Kenya. What essentially happens is the book opens up with explaining the different pagan deities they're worshipping. There's Kimuri or something like that. There's some guy named Kimuri who's a witch guy who they favor, and there's others as well. And then it, from there it folds and collapses into the story of the beginnings of this, this youth named Wakaino. It starts off with him observing a fight between two Nigerians, two Nigerian youth. They're both going at it. One of them said something about the other's father. There's a bash up, man's on the floor, etc., etc. And then from then, you have Wakanu breaking it up. I think that's his name, Wakanu. I'm going to just say it properly. Wakaya. Wayaki. That's his name. Wakaya Wayaki. It's such a hard thing to pronounce, honestly. But Wayaki is, of course, a son of a renowned tribesman amongst the village. He goes home and he's challenged on his father as to where he's been. He said he went around, he had gone and herded the cattle around and stuff like that and gone beyond the mountains. And to impress his father, he says, well, I know the land and I know everything around it. There's an interesting discourse there. And then his father mentions, of course, him being born again, which is actually an interesting concept that the author relates here. And he says, do not be late for your second birth. And so then the story goes on to Wayaki, that's his name, speaking about this upcoming second birth, about him being circumcised, because they have circumcision in this village as well. And about the fact that he's worried, he's nervous, he's going through it. And, it's like coming of age pretty much in the second and third chapter. More so the second chapter. When you get to the third chapter, it's quite interesting. That's his second birth. And so there is this whole ritual. You can see his mum's seated down and, they get a goat's umbilical cord and attach it to the mother somehow. It's not really described how they do it. And of course, it's of course attached to him. Then it's snipped and his hair is shorn. And that, of course, relates to his second birth. And this is like, of course, the idea of bar mitzvah, becoming a man. I think circumcision does proceed after. From what I understand, this is just the beginnings. I'm telling you, by the way. From what I understand, this book will go into detail, from what I've heard of others, about the persecution of the tribesmen in Africa from white people bringing in this new religion called Christianity. And I think the front cover entails that conversion that occurs between young boys in Nigeria. Sorry, Kenya, not Nigeria. The young boys in Kenya and what goes on there. So Lord, do some time. I will tell you guys about what occurs here on a later date. But it's interesting. You should get this book. It's quite small as well. For me, it only costs 10 quid, funny enough. Only costs 10 quid. But since I've been reading it, I've been like, wow, this is interesting. But I know it's going to get deeper. And I've not really sat down and read a good book. Like, really, like, I'm talking about a good, non-fiction storybook, other than, of course, the Bible. I've not really sat down and read a non-fiction non-fiction storybook. Other than Divided Kingdom, which is another book I'll recommend. If you are interested in books, Divided Kingdom is another one. Now there's no Christian influence behind that. I know the author of this may be Christian Nigwigwi, whatever his name is. But Divided Kingdom by Rupert Thompson. If you've not read that book, you need to read it, man. Honestly. I read that more than a few years ago. I think it was about 10 years ago I read that, back in 2015. Well, that'd be 11 years ago now. And I remember reading that book and just being shocked. It is so basically what happens in it, and it still burns in my memory, is that you have this young man called Thomas Parry, and what happens is, because of continual civil war in the United Kingdom, the country is split into the four humours by psychologists. These psychologists essentially state that, look, the only way to solve this civil war is if we break up these divided kingdoms, of course, quote, and we, and we just barricade them in and basically psychologically analyze the young and, of course, their mothers and, brothers and sisters. And we displace them based upon their psychology. So there'll be four humors, right? So there'll be phlegm, bile, I think the other one was yellow bile, of course, black bile, yellow bile. Then there's blood. I think there's 5, actually. I can't remember. But yeah, from what I understand, it was then, of course, sectioned off into blue, yellow, red, and of course, blue, yellow, red, and the green quarter, from what I understand. And these, of course, represent the four humours. And so the government decided that is the best way to go, because as long as we can keep those as psychologically connected to each other together, there won't be any disagreements, right? Because we'll be of the same mind. And so it goes through basically Thomas Parry growing up in the system, because he's been herded out by the police in a car, or it's by the army, really. The army's herding him into a car. He's then put into a sort of school, like, to, of course, grow and learn. And from there, they are sectioned off. Now, his parents, prior to that, were robbed of their child. Thomas Parry's parents were robbed of their child. They were actually moved to a green quarter. Now, I'm spoiling it for you, because at the end of the day, like, that's the big reveal, right? They were moved to the green quarter. I ain't gonna tell you about that, but basically, he then gets moved to the red quarter, which is like sanguine, and it's for leaders, people who are, educated, and it's normally around the sort of Cambridge area, that side, Kentish area. The author does a good job of explaining how these work. He grows up. He then discovers his neighbor is a bit weird. Turns out, his neighbor, and I'm paraphrasing, turns out his neighbor was actually separated during what is known as the divide from his wife. But then they were put together again because, of course, of a displacement in the psychological team or something like that. So his wife is brought back, but they start having doubts about his psychology, and they were thinking to put him in a green corner. So in order to stop him from putting them in the green quarter, he has to act and behave totally sanguine. So he has to behave like, basically, he is psychologically this mentality. He can't show any other forms of emotion or anything else. He has to be this temperamentality. So, for example, if you have somebody who's very angry within the red quarter, they would be immediately shipped off to the yellow quarter. That would just be it. That's how they dealt with issues. And yeah, I mean, the big thing behind it is the evident problem psychologically with this system. that it doesn't work, because ultimately, you know, sectioning people off based upon psychological traits doesn't deal with latent or hidden psychological traits. And so it eventually comes to, it eventually gets to the point where Thomas Parry grows up. He starts going to different quarters, right? He wants to travel. He becomes a part of the government first in the Red Quarter. Then he ends up, of course, going out there to investigate different quarters. He goes to the spiritual quarter, which is full of religious people, stuff like that. So people like me, basically. Oh, he goes over to the blue quarter. And over there, he gets, of course, psyched up. He gets his palms read by people. He ends up going into some sort of flow state and some orb, loses his mind, And then he ends up, of course, after losing his mind, trampling all over to the, I think it was, green, yeah. So he ends up going to the yellow quarter. And in the yellow quarter, there's a bunch of Croydonites. So, I mean, there's a whole fight ensuing there, and, they're bashing him about. But, he meets this family, and, the family's there in general, just calm people. And so he actually finds out that it's only really a small number of Croydonites that are actually there. The rest are just people who are very confused why they're there to begin with, who think that they're this when they're not, who may have some temperamentalities, like may have some, temper issues, but they're just people. And then I think finally he ends up going to the green quarter, and he sees that his parents' names are listed there and that they've passed away. And then the story goes off a bit. I ain't gonna lie, the story goes off a bit towards the end, because then he meets this girl. This man's single; he's not been married. So he meets a girl, and essentially this girl is how do I put it? This girl can fly over the borders. She has the ability to fly. That bit just, I can't explain that bit to you. The girl was able to fly, and they ended up marrying, and that was it. I was actually looking for retribution. Not my whole thing was, so is he going to conquer the quarters? Is he going to shut down the borders? Is he going to start engaging and psychoanalyzing people properly without, of course, separating them into four humors? Because even the Hippocratic four humors didn't work. Not really. Like, for example, they still do it today with blood lead, right? If you've got too much blood in your system, that's why you're ill. If you've got too much yellow bile in your system, that's why you're ill. She wasn't a witch. No, she wasn't a witch, apparently. She could just fly over the borders. So remember I said that the divided kingdom was sectioned off into four quarters. She was able to fly over them. She wasn't a witch. It's just described that she's able to do it. She had green eyes. I'm like, okay. I mean, we're just going there. Like, Thomas Parry's just going there. It's an interesting book, actually. It's still etched into my mind. I think the concepts behind it are more serious than people realize. And, there is a sort of divide. I mean, at the end of the book, the author, Rupert Thompson, actually quotes his list of, in his bibliography, the Freemasons. So it was actually a Masonic idea to separate the United Kingdom into four humors. No joke. You can look it up. But, I mean, yeah, it does, doesn't it? It sounds like something they'll do in a spin-off. It's like, we've gone from analyzing the four quarters of this very weird dystopia system to women's flying over borders and connecting with dudes. So I'm like, all right, cool, okay. And then he marries this woman, and then it's like, okay. You'd have to read it again. Maybe there's stuff that I've missed. Maybe I've missed the whole premise. But I mean, I know this one thing that that just weirded me out. I was just like, okay, cool. I mean, are we gonna really do this? I mean, what films can I remember where they just do that? Where they go from basically the first film is like, it was Cars 2. It was Cars 2. I mean, I'm not a kid, obviously, but yeah, Cars is quite old. I remember watching Cars 1, and it was about racing, it was about all this stuff. And then Cars 2 was about spies. I was like, what? Cars 2 is about spies. I'm like, what is this? Where's this come from? I think there's other, you could probably mention some Rolling Up Everest where they just do this, where the first film is completely unrelated to the second film. You're like, the character's been pushed into World War II. I'm like, what? You were literally living in Stockwell in 2025 AD. What's going on? I mean, they sort of, at least this is where they do it with spin-offs. They really mess it up. And I think that's the one part that does, because I don't think that was needed. I think, like, Thomas ushering in the new rebellion would have been actually quite a good way to end the book. for me. But I think that's where, of course, Rupert Thompson, who's not me, he's the author of the book, so I can't really critique him. That's where he's like, look, boom, we're gonna just do it this way, and he just leaves it on a cliffhanger. But the most thought-provoking thing, I can't speak English, is the idea that there is true division. There's not, not everybody's in the same lane. But I don't think that's psychological. I think that's ideological. So, after I read that book, my thoughts were like, if you really wanted to separate this country, you would separate it based upon ideologies or cultures. And that's a really big question to ask. What really could we do to separate this country if you wanted to? And what really separates us? What really divides us as people? I would say it's ideologies and cultures. I mean, it depends what you're calling culture. And somebody who's more intelligent than me can understand that a bit better. Maybe I'm not explaining it well. But for example, you've got, in Tower Hamlets, for example, Birmingham, you've got Islamic communities. That's an ideological divide. If you were to ask them, okay, you guys can live in this side, I'm sure they'll accept it. Pretty much. Maybe you'll get the odds who are, pretty much like, nah, I wouldn't do that. But majority would, if they're fundamentalists, would want to say, yeah, we want to stay around Muslims. Imagine you did that with Catholics and then Protestants. I mean, eventually you'd have a divided kingdom. And then atheists and so on and so on. But the evident problem is that that's not going to really deal with their psychological profile either. It could be that you'll find people who are born into these societies who reject the principles, and so it becomes cyclical. It's kind of the same system as the Hunger Games, basically. Like, think about the film The Hunger Games. I think Rupert Thompson's sort of borrowing that concept. I don't know which one was written first, but I mean, I think he's borrowing from that, because when I read that book, The Hunger Games, years ago, we're talking years ago, man. Yeah, that was the same system. It was like District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then based upon one's decree or social status, you would be marked in these different areas. That's another good book to read. But again, I wouldn't watch the films, man. That's mad. So yeah, books I've recently bought. I don't know if you got any other books that you recommend. I will buy them. I used to, when I was younger, I'm not gonna lie to you, I used to read books, man. So I read Harry Potter. I read a book series called what's it called again? Cherub. Read that whole book series. I can't lie, it was mad. It was about MI5 agents that were children that were being trained in some group organization called Cherub, and they basically just do mad stuff, mad tech stuff, like get into madness. And of course there is one book which I have on my shelf, which I haven't read in a while. It's I'll just say it. It's The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And basically it just has the dog with a fork in it. And so what happens is there's this kid, age of 14. He basically goes out of his yard, he finds a fork in a dog. The dog is unalived, it's dead. And yeah, the whole premise is he's basically Sherlock Holmes now, and he's trying to discover what's going on. And through that whole process, you find out he's autistic. He's you can see as he struggles with social abilities. He struggles here, he struggles there. Turns out his dad did it. So I'm going to spoil that. Turns out his dad did it because of a fling that occurred with the neighbor. And yeah, there's this whole ending bit where he just moves in with his dad and his mom. You fit the relationship with them after that. I don't know. But anyway, I'm speaking too much about stuff that don't matter. How you guys doing? Oh man. So yeah, books that I recommend, those anyway. Second topic, the critique of the Anglican Churches. Now, so you probably know this because I've known it for ages. Sir Mullally is now the Archbishop of Canterbury. She's now the Archbishop of Canterbury, which means all those churches that are under her are evidently under the remit of a female archbishop. Now, I've been in the Anglican Church for so many years. I was actually baptized in the Free Anglican Church. I just finished a 3-part series called World Religions and Cults from AIG. First book that shows what is thought about all religions, that essentially copy their morals from Christianity or Troy. The second is on the mystical types of religions, and the third is on humanistic religions, and it tells you how to refute and try to bring them to Christ. Wow, that's interesting. AIG, who's AIG? AIG? Never heard of AIG as an author. Never heard of AIG actually. Maybe it's somewhere. You're gonna have to tell me a bit more about it. I don't know. Yeah, that sounds interesting though. That sounds interesting. I can't lie, you know. I can't lie, you know. That sounds interesting. Yeah, because like humanistic religions and the mystical types and how you defeat them. People need more knowledge about, I think, Hinduism and Sikhism, especially Christians. I one day just sat down because I knew we were going to a temple. This was maybe 2-3 years ago. We were going to go to a Hindu temple. We ended up doing that, by the way, which was the Brahmanarian. I can't remember what it was called. It was BP Brahman. I can't remember. Oh man, I've forgotten it. It was some weird name. It's just like BP Brahmanarian. So we walked in there, and yeah, it turns out there's a statue of a dude outside. We don't know who that was, just some giant dude. We're walking in. We have to take our shoes off. And then we're just examining the place. And it turns out they believe that this dude, the recent one, the recent guru, whatever, he's God on earth. And in fact, he has been through many Doctor Who reincarnations. So he started off coming down in the 17th century as a child, I think, around the age of 17. And then since then, he's had successors. And how the successors are chosen is essentially anybody's guess. It's a bit subjective, actually. It's called Batshmal. Yeah, it's called Batshmal. Oh man, I've forgotten the name. Batshwamanarian. Yeah, that's it. It was a BAPS. Schwamanarian. No joke. Let me share my screen. No joke. Oh, Answers in Genesis. Yeah, I know about those guys. Yeah, that's brilliant, man. I haven't bought a lot of Answers in Genesis books. I think I've got one, but it's related to Jason Lyle. And Jason Lyle, of course, invented Answers in Genesis. So yeah, brilliant. Let me show this. This is it's BAPs or Baps Swaminarian Sansfa. I don't know whether there's a difference between Sansfa or Swaminos, but we went to basically Baps Swaminarian, which is in North London, from what I understand. And the videos are actually uploaded online. I need to re-upload them because they're actually some interesting videos. But we went in there, we saw them basically bowing before those statues, much like the Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox do, and worshipping them, much like the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics do. And basically what they believe is this dude here, Mahanat Swami Maharajas, he is the descendant of the Swaminarian. So here is the founder and successors, of course. These are all, according to them, God. They believe that God essentially came as these dudes. Now, when I say these dudes, basically this dude dies, this dude comes after. This dude dies, this dude comes after. So how they factor in, I don't know. It's not really a defined system. It's just like, well, this dude looks a bit holy. Let's choose him. So this dude basically is from the 17th century. He was a young man. He apparently came from the sky. What's this? I've got Peppa Pig on here. What is going on, man? Man. Anyway, so we've got Bhagwan Swaminarayan. So all of these are going to be the descendants of Swaminarayan. And they're not just descendants, but they're him. They are him. Now, there are different systems of thought. And so that's why you've got to study a bit. And that's why it's a good thing you bought that book from Answers in Genesis. But I think what's missing in apologetics is a lack of understanding of different cults and, different religions. But yeah, this is the most recent one, Mahant Swami Maharaja or Maharaj. That's the one I saw. They have a big statue of this dude. Now, this dude was evidently fatter than this dude. This dude is really skinny. And you have Yogi Maharaj, Shastri Maharaj, Bhagiji. And I've noticed a sort of pattern here where these three dudes are young looking, these guys are elderly. So it seems to be the case that their God is incarnating as an elderly man each time. And so they believe he incarnates. So after this guy dies, he's 92, another successor will be picked. I believe they just pick it randomly. It's also stated that, let's say, for example, Gutanad Swami, right? This guy dies. It's also stated that the other successor will be picked during his lifetime, because he will, of course, state that this guy's the next one. And there's no real ontological reason as to why. There's no real objective reason as to why. It's just, I picked this dude. He's God now. It's a bit of a strange system, if you ask me. But that's Bap's Schwarminarian. So me and Amy, I need to do this. Me and Amy actually went to Bap Schwarminarian. We saw the big statues. It's a big gold temple. Inside, you take off your shoes and they got candles, they got stuff burning, they got all sorts of stuff going on. And this leads people in. Right? When we went there, we saw a couple, an Indian man and his white girl. And the white girl is obviously trying to impress him and stuff like that. Long story short, the Indian man, we have a conversation with him. His white girl was saying, "Oh, but every religion is wonderful, but we have the fullness of knowledge. We have the fullness of faith and beauty." And I was just thinking, this is what's luring you in, some random gold and nonsensical images of some random pingus. Like that's literally what's luring you in. I mean, this is the issue with Hinduism and all this Sikhism. Fault. Absolutely faulty. So that's Bap Schwarminarian. But anyway, what was I going to say? Moving on. So the Church of England. Right, I was a part of the Church of England. I was actually baptized into the Church of England. Technically, it was the Free Church of England, which is the Free Church of England is a sect that comes out of the Church of England in the 18th century, because in the 18th century, dudes who were educated got together and said, "Look, this is too Catholic. These guys are just doing all this pageantry." And so what they did in the church that I was in, which was there since the 18th century, by the way, they threw away all of the understanding of Eucharist every week. So they threw away the understanding of the Eucharist being mandatory, stuff like that. I don't think it was mandatory in the Anglican Church early on, but they threw that away. They threw away incense. They don't burn incense in the Free Anglican Church, by the way. They don't do that, which is fine. They still have an image, which kind of interests me. They still have an image. If you go into the church I went to, they had an image. I don't think they have it at every Free Anglican Church under GAFCON, but they do have it, or they did have it at the church that I went to. They actually came out of the Anglicans and, of course, formed their whole group there. And they still exist today. Calvin Robinson was famously under the Free Anglican Church. He was actually a bishop under them, as he was cancelled by the Anglican Church proper. So they made him a bishop over at the Free Anglican Church. He was actually under the tutelage of my pastor. No joke. I was actually that close to meeting Calvin Robinson. Now, I mean, it doesn't mean anything because Calvin Robinson's a heretic. But I mean, if I was to meet him, I would tell him he's a heretic. Straight. It sounds controversial, but I have to be honest. I would tell him he's a heretic. Because at the end of the day, affirming Catholicism as a true Christian religion is heresy, my friend. I don't know about his eternal state. That has nothing to do with me, but yeah. So yeah, long story short, I was baptized, and I've actually grown up in these churches pretty much as a Christian over the last 6 years. I've been in and out of different churches, of course, but the predominant churches I've been in long enough have been Anglican churches. So the Free Anglican Church, I was there for 1.5 years, and the church that I was recently in, as recent, of course, as last year, for 8 months, was a Anglican church. Now, evidently, I wouldn't attend an Anglican church, even back then, even last year. It wasn't my intention to attend an Anglican church because I agreed with the system of the Anglican church. I didn't. Even then, the idea of LGBTQ affirmation is problematic. Their ideas of abortion, their ideas of female ordination are nonsensical. But the church he went to seemed to not have that position. They seem to be like male ordination, same-sex marriage is wrong, marriage between male and female. So I was like, okay, let's go to this church. Was there for 8 months, of course. And then what happened? Amy has uploaded a video here about what happened there. But boom, now that's moved on. In all the churches I've been to, especially Anglican churches, that claim to be, orthodox in their leanings, there's no drive and no fight to lash back against the Anglican Church hierarchies and those who are part of the, of course, conversation in the, I don't know whether it's called the Great Dialogue or something. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, there's no need for them to go and do that. They're lazy. It's weird to say to somebody else, I'm lazy. Oh, you're lazy. I mean, I know what I am, but yeah, they're lazy. They don't have a drive. The pastors, especially my ex-pastor, absolutely lazy. I'm not talking about, he sits about, does nothing. What I'm saying is he has a great position and he can have great influence and he doesn't use it for the purposes of growing the kingdom. He has a great chance in challenging the authority of the Anglican Church and doesn't use it. His bishop, who I've met, who I've spoken to, and who I completely G-checked in the debate, his bishop has stated openly that female ordination is a secondary issue. So his bishop is absolutely C-U-C-K-E-D, can't. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Like, you can look up what he said. At the ordination of Sarah Mullally, the bishop over the church that I was going to basically said something along the lines of, we welcome Sarah Mullally, to the bishopric. I think many people have a disagreement about this, blah, 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 but we welcome her none the same. This guy's a cock. He was, in fact, when I spoke to him, he was visibly upset by what I had to say. He wasn't showing it like, he weren't like, but you could tell he's uncomfortable completely. Because I was basically telling him, Galatians 1, if anybody has another gospel, let them be accursed. 1 Timothy chapter 3, that a man of one wife is supposed to be a bishop of a church, not a woman. He didn't like none of that. He was uncomfortable completely. I challenged him, not Richard. Now, to this day, none of those people in that church, I'm going to name drop it, St. Anne's, none of the people in St. Anne's have repented. None of them. None of the leadership. Not Richard, not any of them. Not Matthew, none of them. They're still a part of the Church of England, and they're happy to be aligned with heretics, like, of course, their leader. And they're not willing to call it out. They have a platform to do it, they don't want to do it. And the only excuse I've really heard from the likes of Richard, Oxford educated, all this stuff, the only excuse I heard from him is, it may turn people away if we're too combative against the likes of the LGBTQ community. But I'm not really asking anybody to do that. I'm not asking people to go out all guns blazing. I never said that. He strawmanned my position. We don't have to be constantly opposed to the LGBTQ community to be showing that we have doctrinal standards and you're opposing them. The church functions this way or not that way. That's a church issue. If the LGBTQ community would have a problem with that, then they need to take up with God. It's as simple as that. But it's not like we're going to like their rainbow communities and saying, oh yeah, you can't be gay. That's not what we're doing here. What we're saying is within what is supposed to be the Church of England, female ordination, gay marriage, wrong. Now, as for people who have done it, and this is like the complex issue, right? As for people that have done it and engage with it, you can't turn such people away if they want to, of course, enter the church buildings, but they just won't be a part of the church. They won't be members of the church. And that's the case with every church. That's been the case for centuries. You can't stop the devil from going to a church. I don't know why he would want to sit in there, but but you can't really stop that. For example, you can't know who your congregation is, a Unitarian or is on some, universalist nonsense. You can't know that. You can't know that. So, But I feel like the leadership needs to be confronted. And the only way it's going to be done is if somebody with a no-nonsense approach does it. A no-nonsense approach. Not somebody who's a wimpy, whiny baby. Somebody with a no-nonsense response and no-nonsense approach. Here's the thing. A lot of these women in there, they're not dumb. When I say that, I'm not saying that to congratulate them. I'm saying that to their shame. They will spin a narrative that the words in the Bible do not mean what they say when they're speaking about women ordination. Or we can just refer to Phoebe or refer to Deborah. We could just say that. Like Pippa White. Like Pippa White is a snake, bro. Real talk. I hate him, but that's a snake. That's a snake. I agree with you. At least be able to probably say that it's wrong. We live in a sin. But here's the thing. The Anglican Church proper are doing the opposite thing. And under Sarah Mullally, they will continue to do the opposite thing. Because Sarah Mullally agrees with same-sex marriage. And so does the Archbishop of York, by the way. He does as well. I think his name's Stephen Collette. I can't remember. Yeah, Stephen Collette. I can't remember his name. So the Archbishop of York and, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's not really an archbishop, to be honest. He's just in sin. Sarah Mullally, both of these individuals are promoting homosexual marriage in the church. And so give it a amount of time, they'll be pushing it more. And, the Living in Love and Faith initiative, I think, was springboarded by Sarah Mullally as well. So Sarah Mullally's had a position in the church for many, many years. He just hasn't been archbishop. But it's kind of interesting that she is. That shows that collectively, because they've been arguing about this for a while now, collectively, all sides of those bishops within the Anglican Church all agreed in totality, or at least majority agreed totality, that this woman should be elected as archbishop. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I saw a video. I'm going to get it up right now, actually. Of her being called out, and they tried to cover up, because really, what's going on is that the Anglican Church has been taken over by Satan. Obviously, the church proper could never be taken over by Satan, but institutions can be. The Anglican Church has been taken over by Satan, and so what's happening is you have a woman at the head. You have all this, free love. It's going to turn into community centers, and we're going to just have people just, doing what they want to, whatever, doing a mess. There's going to be pride flags everywhere. Trust me. Just give it time. Just give it time. We're already at that point now, anyway. We were already. Look, 3 years ago, me and Amy went to a pride parade. We weren't going there to celebrate. We're going there to evangelize. I had the mic on. I was ready. I was G-checking. I was talking against sin, of course, against homosexuality. And we walked into a church. It was all recorded. I think I uploaded it on this channel as well. It was all recorded. We walked into a church, and the female pastor there, I'm sorry, had pride flags all over the shop. So it's not far off. But this was interesting. Let's go to yeah, so new archbishop confirmed on some wildness. Now, this is an abomination. It's accursed. And anybody who's an Anglican needs to rethink their life. Obviously, all churches, mess up, but this is just wild. This is not even messing up. I've completely spilled the bowl of beans everywhere and broke the plate over your head. Now, this ain't messing up. This ain't an accident. This is purpose. So you see all these chumps here. Like, notice something, right?
Vintage new electronics category means you can earn again when you sell to tons of potential.
In the name of God, amen.
In the name of God. Did you just hear that as well? In the name of God. Not in the name of Jesus, because she doesn't believe in Jesus.
Having been named and elected Archbishop and pastor of the Cathedral and Metropolitical Church of Christ Canterbury, and having been requested to accept such election by the College of Canons of the said Cathedral, I, the Right Reverend and Right Honourable Dame Sarah Elizabeth Mullally, trusting in the clemency...
Sarah Elizabeth Mullally. Thomas Cranmer would roll around in his grave. Sarah Elizabeth Mullally. That's the name of a pastor, man.
of the Almighty God, do accept such election, and I now give my consent in writing to the said election.
By virtue of the authority vested in us, confirm the election of the Right Reverend and Right Honourable Dame Sarah Elizabeth Mullally to the Archbishopric.
Now, Dame is an interesting claim as well. She has the title of Dame. Why? Because she's made a Dame by, of course, the authority or the monarch of the land, which would have, at the time when she made Dame, would have been Queen Elizabeth, right? II. So she's made Dame. So the reason why she's in this position has been something that's been plotted and planned the whole time. And yes, it is a conspiracy theory. It isn't just she worked this way up because she was such a nice, loving person. I'm sure she was nice to people. But she was also an LGBTQ affirming heretic who's a universalist.
Of Canterbury.
And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be among you and remain.
Yeah, ridiculous, because she doesn't know the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But I mean, what's interesting here is, you know, this church, I've been to it, it's St. Paul's Cathedral. I used to attend there a bunch of times in the past. I had to repent of that because they're teaching this madness. The interesting thing is you can't be baptized in there, because I tried to be baptized. You can't be baptized in St. Paul's Cathedral unless you are part of course, the Royal Constabulary, or unless you are royalty itself. Unless you're part of the Royal Constabulary, or unless you're royalty itself, you cannot be baptized there. So already that's hierarchism. Already that's I mean, honestly, the Anglican Church is dead, bro. I don't know why people still
Remain with you always. Amen.
I look at all these mugs in dresses. Every single one of them are clapping. Why? Because the Anglican Church has been given over to Satan. Now, there was a heckler, and that's what I wanted to get into. There was one dude out of, I don't know how many people, who heckled. I've got to rate this guy, actually.
They just announced it.
Champagne! We are now officially Witch's banking brand of the year.
We're not. Nationwide is.
They're keeping branches open? Didn't they give over 4 million members 100 quid each?
I don't remember ordering that.
You literally said, blimp me.
Nationwide, a good way to bank.
By statute law.
You're watching Sky News. We're bringing you live pictures from St. Paul's Cathedral.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why. I want to get the heckler up. I don't know why I've got that. I just want to get the video of the heckler.
We have a woke Archbishop of Canterbury. Officially, Sarah Mullally took up her post following a service today at St. Paul's Cathedral. But what the mainstream media don't want to tell you is that this service did not go without a hitch. Indeed, it was briefly interrupted by a heckler, that heckler who was saying, actually, I do have serious objections to this appointment. Watch what happened.
And that no person has appeared in opposition to the confirmation.
You see, that guy, modern day Ian Paisley, bro. I can't lie. That guy is a G for it. I hope you guys saw that. He literally, I think he said something along the lines of, I did. I have serious concerns about Sarah Mullally or something like that. And yeah, that's what you need to be doing, Richard. But you're not going to do it because you're too much of a weakling. And he knows that as well. He, in fact, said that if I was part of the General Assembly, would start a riot. Yes, I would. They would all try to unalive me because I want to tell them the truth. Somebody's got to do it, man. What is this? But at the same time, I just realized that nothing can be done. At a certain point, infiltration is impossible. When the very system itself is completely eroded, what are you going to do? It'd be like putting a matchstick to try and fix a broken door. Like, what? The door's collapsing. You're going to put a little matchstick on the frame. Oh, that'll fix it. And that's what people are doing right now. That's the plan of Richard and many others, by the way. A few others I've seen who are part of the Church of England who claim to be Orthodox think that they're just going to infiltrate the church and change it. No, they're not. They're not going to do anything. Without the power of God, nothing can be done. But the problem is, you're aligned and submissive to women leadership. And they were even prior to that. For example, the Bishop of London oversaw the safeguarding principles within St. Anne's, who was the Bishop of London during that time. The now Bishop of Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah Mallory. In fact, Amy got a letter from the Archbishop of Canterbury. Sorry, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Well, yeah, it technically was from the now Archbishop of Canterbury back then about the safeguarding concerns in St. Anne's and the whole situation there. Because they're all cowards. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not making myself better than anybody else because I'm not better than anybody else. I'm not better than Richard. I'm not better than anybody. But that's the thing. If we don't address these concerns, where are they going to go? And this is the problem with ecumenism. It's the problem with the LGBTQ liberalism, which, by the way, is just ecumenism packaged up. Ecumenism and LGBTQ community, they're all of the same cloth. This is why ecumenism must be fought against. It is an abomination. We need to challenge these things. It's not just going to be the case, oh, well, Sarah Mullally is a Trinitarian Christian who, of course, affirms the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, Bob. No, we need to challenge these institutions. And at some point, we've got to say, where is the line where we consider these people heretics? I would say it's when they're breaking the clear witness of the Bible. When they're deciding that, oh, homosexuality is okay, broken it, heretics. Regardless of whether they believe in a Trinity or not. You just saw her claim to believe in a Trinity. It wasn't, of course, a Trinity. Yeah, they shut him up. That's the interesting thing as well. They shut him up. The new Ian Paisley here, they shut him up. How you doing, Jacob? God bless you, man. And they shut him up. They kicked him out and shut him up. Because that's what they're doing. They are controlling narratives within this false and wicked mafia institution. So my advice would be, and this is why it's called a critique of the Anglican churches. If anybody's an Anglican, leave the Anglican church. Straight. You have to defy it. You can't remain an Anglican. If you remain Anglican, you are giving support to these churches. They will quickly lose support when you leave. And they will have to, of course, either make drastic changes or maybe try to engage more with the LGBTQ community. But I'm telling you, 10 years down the line, every single Anglican church is going to have a gay flag in it. They're going to have gay flags in Anglican churches. They're going to support gay marriage because they're already Trojan horsing it in. You think they're going to ignore that? No, they're going to bring forth the gay agenda. You're going to be in basically churches full of gays, lesbos, and all sorts of stuff. You're going to be hearing the most gay sermons on the planet. You have people going in there doing drag dances, booty whining. You'll see man, of course, wearing knickers. That's your church now. Give it time, including Richards. Your church is like that as well. Even if they want to make, Johnny the next, of course, bishop. Johnny doesn't know anything. He will get overtaken. Give it time. He's not strong enough. None of them are. Whether it be Seb, whether it be Johnny, whether it be, of course, Richard. I mean, come on. What the flaming? What is man, I've forgotten his name because that's how little I care about these guys. I mean, what is the rector over there going to really do? What is the of course the vice pastor over there, Matthew? That's his name. What's Matthew really going to do? Who's he going to challenge? He can challenge my back foot. Like, he's going to challenge anybody. What fiery preacher is going to stand there and say, you need to leave, you are not Anglican? What? Who's going to do that? None of you. Because you're scared. Because you lose your jobs, you lose your careers, you lose your houses, you lose everything. And that's the point, right? It's really just a career to these people. The sad thing is, even when it comes to the Orthodox branches of the Church of England, they are all sold out to a career. That's it. They're offered, of course, the promise of a rectory. They're offered this, which, by the way, could easily be on the line. You get the right, of course, liberal leader. That's it. It's it. I mean, it's just when a chance is so, slim. Like, for example, Steve Cottrell advocating for the LGBTQ agenda straight. Archbishop of York, by the way. We saw that coming from a mile away. I mean, what are they going to do now? What, go under GAFCON? Well, even that's been infiltrated by who? By my ex-pastor, who affirms gay marriage. Now, he's not promoting it because he said himself by his own words, Mark, he said himself by his own words that, well, you know, they wouldn't fund him if he'd actually stated these things to him, or at least he had these opinions. He said, oh, well, we should be able to have a disagreement of opinion. Not on this. You could disagree with whether Jesus wore red or purple. You can even disagree about, you know, things like some tertiary nonsense, like, oh, well, you know, the millennial reign will occur at this time. But you ain't disagreeing when it comes to marriage, bro. And you ain't disagreeing when it comes to female leadership. That ain't happening. So already GAFCON's been infiltrated. So now of course, you ain't stopping nothing, man. Honestly, the pageantry, the hierarchical system of churches, that's done away with. I do feel like the only surviving churches that will actually thrive, because the churches are on a downward spiral anyway. The churches that are going to survive are the ones that are going to update themselves. They're going to be more emotive, going to be more in tune with online spaces, and they're going to be more, of course, not necessarily family oriented, but more oriented in togetherness and respect and unity. Those who treat, of course, their congregants not like merely laity but family. But the pageantry, the Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and Anglican churches, it will die out eventually. There may be a small growth. I think the reason why there's a small growth of the Eastern Orthodox churches is because of the online predominance of, you know, figures like Jay Dyer and stuff like that. And his arguments, of course, because sophistry can win a debate. But I mean, ultimately, that's going to die out. And then what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I don't know. The Baptist churches are going down. What are you going to do? In fact, if I can look it up, maybe there's a research poll on churches growth UK. Now, this doesn't represent everything, so it doesn't represent, of course, people dying. You know, maybe it will, of course, but evidently it's going to be a change, right? This is from 2025. Now they are saying there's drastic growth. I don't really want the church ones. I want something a bit more neutral, like Pew Research or something like that. The reason is because I don't want people to just mar it with their nonsense. I want it to be Pew Research. Okay. I don't know what's going on. So let's see this. Now, it does mention a resurgence, which is interesting. I think it's only going to be limited. Okay, so here we go. Decline of Christianity in the UK. Okay. So I think this is it. I can show you guys this. I don't think it will actually. Let me try and zoom in. Right, so there is a global Christian population change going on. This is according to Pew Research Center. Christians are the world's largest religious group. Of course, that's very true. But they are shrinking as a share of the global population as large numbers of Christians around the world switch out of religion to become religiously unaffiliated. Yeah, that's, by the way, on the global scale, more and more Christians, or well, more and more people identify as Christians are becoming atheists or non-religious. It's not they're becoming Muslims, they're becoming non-religious. Sub-Saharan Africa has surpassed Europe as the region with the largest number of Christians. Europe used to be the largest Christian nation for a while. But of course, Africa surpassed that. And obviously, Africa, there's persecution involved and stuff like that. And what is deemed Christian, you know, seems a bit laissez-faire. In fact, this is not really going to tell us the actual true number of Christians on the earth. All this is doing is just giving us a rough identity of, well, who calls themselves Christian, who doesn't. But we know that just because somebody calls themselves Christian, that doesn't mean they are. It doesn't factor in Unitarians or Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons. Shout out Jacob. Christian population change varied regional. The number or count of Christians fell in 2 regions in Europe. So here's the numbers. So it looks like, let's just go to Europe because I don't care about the Caribbean. So the Christian count has went by minus 8.8. I don't know any numbers, numeric stuff like that. Man, ain't good with no numbers, you know what I mean? I'm getting with that. I'm good with history, science, you know what I mean? English. The mathematics stuff, don't care. But anybody who knows the mathematics stuff who's just a bit autistic, deal with that, handle that. But there seems to be a significant difference. I think of more than 1 million. There was about 553,630,000 in 2010 who called themselves Christian. Now there's 505,140,000. So that's, I'm going to have to look that up. But that's a big difference. That's maybe more than 10,000, maybe a good 55. Yeah. So it's probably more about 50 million. Sorry, 50,000. No, I said 50 million. That's jokes. 50,000. I said 50 million. So that's in Europe as a whole. Now, bear in mind, there's 10 billion people in London. So imagine how small that is. We're not talking about a big population. We're talking about really small. In fact, the number of people who attend churches in this country, really small compared to the main populace. Share of the world. So the greatest share of the world, Christians. In 2010, it was 25.8% of Christians in Europe. Now there's 22.3. So it's gone down by 3.5. The United States has, of course, the United States has the largest crowd of Christians worldwide. Yeah, so it's basically saying worldwide has become unaffiliated. I'm trying to get to these stats in the United Kingdom. So since 2010, in 2020, the position in the United Kingdom was 33,250,000. Now it's gone down by minus, So yeah, it's basically gone down by minus 650,000 people call themselves Christians. Now that's not telling me everything. I really want to get to Christians in London because they're speaking about this whole growth and blah 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 blah. I just really want to show the actual graph. Okay, I want to get to the graph actually. London, a bit of London, ain't it? London. Okay, why is my face still showing, bro? What's going on, man? Nazrul saying nice. It's not nice, is it? It's not nice. It's actually quite sad. But then again, the road is narrow, Nazrul, right? So those who call themselves Christians evidently aren't, and so we have to factor that in as well. For example, if I said if I said Muslims are growing, but you have the majority who are Ahmadiyas, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you guys don't affirm Ghulam Ahmed or his claim that the Messiah is coming, or the fact that he is the Messiah. You don't affirm that he's the final prophet of Islam. They do. Or the Shia, for example. Like, there's waves of Shia. You don't affirm them. So when you really cut it down and, get rid of the kuffar, you're left with, of course, the actual average of Muslims, which are probably significantly lower if you just cut that out worldwide. So it's going to be the same thing for Christians. In fact, it's going to be significantly lower. So if we're talking about Bible-believing, born-again Christians, nobody's done even a survey on that. I wish they would, but I think it would be taxing. You'd have to knock on every door, ask every member of every household, because you're going to be digging through the weeds to get to, of course, the wheat. But yeah, what was I going to look for? So the Church Times says that there is a growth. I'll just get to that. They are claiming a growth. They're claiming victory. I don't agree with, of course, the statistics. So I don't know. I think there is, of course, a downward spiral, but yeah. Gen Z are more likely to be Roman Catholic than Church of England. That's an interesting thing. Church-going people. So basically, people going to apostasy. That's not really a revival. Then maybe it's a revival of the Roman Catholic Church, but I mean, come on. Church-going among young people, particularly men in England as well, is growing, but not within the Church of England. A new report from Bible Society suggests the Church of England is properly dwindling. And I think if there's any true poll in it will show the numbers falling out after this video. Because I don't tell you, leave the Anglican Church and every stinking body in it. Okay, the dramatic growth is old largely. In fact, you know what? You know what people need to do? Leave the Anglican Church, become Baptist. That's what we're going to do. We're going to become Baptist. I'm seeing too many empty Baptist churches. You know, become Baptist, man. Leave the Anglican Church, become Baptist. It's the only solution. I can't see any other solution because the church will never be perfect. You know, so might as well become Baptist. Everybody right now, leave the Anglican Church. If you're Anglican, I want to hear no excuses. Leave. You've got no excuse to find an Anglican Church. If you're American, different story, bro. I can't lie to you. But I mean, in the UK, yeah, leave the Anglican Church. So what are they saying? They're saying basically, the dramatic growth is owed larger to join. Lord, lose my tongue. To younger generations, it says in 2018, 4% of the 18 to 24-year-olds reported that they attended church monthly, compared with 16% in 2024. So it's not really dramatic. For men, this increased from 4% in 21%. Sorry, 4% to 21%, and for women from 3% to 12%. This is now the second most likely age group to attend church regularly. The result is a curve rather than a straightforward association between age and attendance. The report says the middle-aged, 40 to 54, the least likely to attend 5%. The reversing trend is also due of gender. It says overall attendance by men outstrips attendance by women 10%. Growth among denominations varies. However, in 2018, Anglicans, Church of England, made up 41% of churchgoers. This decreased by 31%. Roman Catholic churchgoers have increased from 23% to 31%. Pentecostals have increased from 4% to 10%. And by the way, worldwide, Pentecostalism is the fastest growing religion. Right, no joke. It's mad. And, you know, I mean, so this is where it just becomes a bit odd. The report suggests that hostility and apathy to Christianity recorded among older generations are consequently being placed by openness. I think what's happening, though, with these generations, 18 to 34, is the internet, TikTok, more experience of religious topics, is essentially leading them to the conclusion, I'm going to be Catholic now. Which is a bit mad. I don't know why you'd become Catholic. For LDS, every region of the world had at least a 20% increase in the number of converts baptized in 2025. I actually didn't know that. I've not been looking up, you know, but I don't, you know, I've obviously told you guys, I don't really take these polls seriously because for me, as a born-again Bible-believing Christian, who's really there? Who's really at that stage? You can find people who are in these churches and they come out and, you know, it is what it is. But when we really look at the actual stats here, how small is that number going to be compared to like this big number of supposed Christians and churches? Very, very small. Now, for Bob, he wants ethno nationalism. And of course, he calls it Christian nationalism. I don't care what he calls it. He wants nationalism in any sort of sense because he's a demon. And he's affirming demon time theology. But for those who are born again, we don't deal with demon time. We don't deal with that stuff at the end of the day. I don't know why I can't hear my voice in this. It's really annoying. So yeah, I mean, you know, that's what's going on. That's what's going on. It's not that we are gaining ground, we are losing ground. We've never had ground to begin with. This is not home. So evidently, Satan will grow. Maybe the Islamic, religion will grow and expand, and there'll be more Muslims in the next 30 years, and white people will be vigorously trapped from their homes by the jihadi, and will become another Ottoman Empire. I don't know. Well, you're not going to fight because if God's willed it, what can you do? And so it's not even defeatist to say this. We just need to be spreading the gospel. And I think the other thing is people in London especially born again Christians, not so much the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics and the Bobites, but for those who are born again, we're in a position now where there's such a great big mission field. There's so much different types of ideologies, and you could just chat to them, share the gospel. There's more of an opportunity now than there ever has been. But I mean, it is what it is. There's so much snakes and dogs as well, so I don't know what to say. We don't know what to say. But yeah, all I'm saying is leave the Anglican Church. Anybody got any questions, man? Just leave the Anglican Church. That's all I'm saying. It's nuts. Move out of it. Any questions? Nazrul, nice. Of course. As my people, children are their oppressors and women rule over them. Oh, to my people, they which lead you cause you to err and destroy the way of your paths. Amen, Tribune. Amen. And that will be the final quote there. That is true. Look at what they've done. They are leading our people to err. But are they really our people? That's the question you ask yourself. I don't think they are. But anyway, I'm going to close out. God bless.